All right, guys, back for chapter 3 and chapter 4 of Song for a Whale. Chapter 3. Even though electronics is a sciencey thing, science was the one class where I wasn't reading about it on the sly. Usually I paid attention to what was going on in there because I like science and my teacher, Sophia Alamia. I even liked the way her name rolled off my hand like a wave when I spelled it out. Miss Alamia wrote the letters HZ on the board. Remember what this stands for, she asked? A few hands went up, and Miss Alamina called on me. I spelled out Hertz, Hertz, and Miss Charles voiced Hertz for her and the class. That's right, said Miss Alamina. And what does it measure? The frequency of sound. I wonder why Miss Alamina was reviewing frequencies. We had taken the test on it months ago. I found something that ties in nicely with what we're studying now, she said, as if she'd heard me. It's about a special whale, and you'll see why the frequency of his song is important. Miss Alamina pressed some keys on the computer at her desk. Her eyeglasses reflected the video that was playing. The projector screen in front of the room showed a big blue square with no signal in one corner. I was heading to Miss Alamina's desk even before she signed, "Please help," to me. After restarting the video and pausing it, I connected the computer to the projector signal and then clicked the CC at the bottom of the screen to turn on the closed captioning, which is where they put words as they're speaking. The words of what they're saying pops up at the bottom. The video started out with a whale swimming in the ocean. Because of the captions, I could read the words on the screen instead of from Miss Charles or Mr. Charles's hands. The dark gray-blue body of the whale filled up the screen, his tail waving up and down. The narrator in the video talked about a whale called Blue 55, who swam around by himself and not in a pod like most whales. As far as anyone knew, it had always been that way. He didn't have any friends or a family to swim with or talk to. He was a type of baleen whale, the kind that ate plankton and small fish, not the kind with teeth that ate squid and seals. But he was a hybrid. His mother was a blue whale and his father was a fin whale. The problem, said the narrator, is Blue 55's unique voice. Most whales call out at frequency of 35 hertz and lower, while this lonely whale's sounds are at around 55 hertz. Only about 20 hertz off, but it made a big difference. He was speaking a language that only he knew. Furthermore, his song is in a unique pattern. Even if the other whales can hear him, they don't understand what he's saying. Blue 55 likely couldn't communicate with his own parents. My stomach tightened into a ball. I wanted another whale on the screen to swim up to Blue 55, or at least look at him. The strange calls of Blue 55 were first detected by a naval sonar in the late 1980s. Marine biologists figured out what was making the sounds and why the whale was all alone in the ocean. I didn't notice until the words on the screen blurred that my eyes were watery. Mr. Charles handed me a tissue from his pocket. Maybe I'd sniffed or something. Allergies, I signed without looking away from the video. The narrator went on to say that researchers from a marine sanctuary had tried to put a tracker on Blue 55 the year before so they could follow his migration pattern, which was also weird and unlike other whales. They did get a sample of his skin to test. That's how they figured out his parents had been different species. But before they could attach the tracker to him, he dove down and swam away. He wouldn't need to resurface for a breath for another 20 minutes. Without a tracker on him, the only way anyone ever knew where he was swimming was from the underwater microphones that had picked up his song. I couldn't remember standing up, but when the video ended and Miss Alamina started talking, I had to look down to see Mr. Charles. Everyone's eyes were on me as I slid back into my chair. My textbook was on the floor. I must have knocked it off my desk when I stood up. I left it at my feet. Can you imagine that? Miss Alamina asked. Swimming around for all those years, unable to communicate with anyone? Yes. She had said something else about frequencies, but I wasn't paying attention anymore. I looked through Mr. Charles as if I was seeing that whale on the screen. Blue 55 didn't have a pod of friends or a family who spoke his language, but he still sang. He was calling, and no one heard him. Chapter 4. He hadn't always swum alone. Long ago, when the loudest sounds in the ocean were the sounds of the whales, he had a pod. Those first whales had tried to talk to him. Every day they worked to change their songs to something like his. He returned their calls, but the sounds meant nothing to them. He heard the other whales, but nothing he sang back made sense. They thought he didn't understand. They communicated to one another past him, through him, across him, like he was a coral reef or a kelp forest they passed by. But he heard all of it. He understood them when they despaired, giving up on ever hearing him, and when they lamented that he would never be able to contribute to the pod. He couldn't warn them of a coming predator or announce the scent of waters that were good for feeding. Yes, I can, he bellowed. There, waves of krill. He turned to show them the way. He sang his message, struggling to match the sounds of the whales around him. But the sea grabbed his song and dragged it away, too high for others to reach. One night he awoke to float to the surface for a breath. He found himself all alone. After so much time, with so many songs unheard, his family had left him. He called out, "Where are you? And what will I do now?" Knowing no answers would come, knowing the sounds held only meaning for himself. All right, we'll do one more because that was a really short chapter. Chapter 5. At lunch, I sat at a table with other people, but still alone. I could actually read lips all right. Not that I'd ever tell Miss Conn. No matter how good I was, there would be no way to catch everything. Too many sounds look the same, and in a group of people, it's impossible to pick up more than a word or two here and there. It's even worse if they're eating. Some kids tried to remember to look at me when they talked. Then they'd get into a conversation with everyone else, too fast for me to keep up. A couple of kids knew the sign language alphabet and would spell out sentences letter by letter. That took forever. So I tell them just to go ahead and write it. Whenever I spelled something back, they didn't catch it anyway, unless I slowed down so much that by the time I got to the end of the sentence, they had forgotten the beginning. Some people at my table were in my science class. I was still thinking about the whale called Blue 55 and wondering if they were too. It didn't look like anyone was talking about him. I wanted to ask if they thought he liked swimming around by himself or if he wanted friends. Maybe he tried singing like the other whales and couldn't do it, or he was happy singing his own song. Nina walked by with some of her friends and waved like she wanted to tell me something super important. Even when I understood her, she never said anything important. But she had seen the Blue 55 video, and obviously she was interested in sign language. I took a deep breath and decided to give it a try. As clearly as possible, I signed to her, "What did you think of that whale?" Nina pointed at my lunch and signed something that made absolutely no sense. I couldn't even figure out what she was trying to get at. Maybe the message was jumbled because she was excited and signing too fast, as if her hands couldn't keep up with her brain. I held up a hand to try to slow her down. Numbers and letters were easy enough to understand. So I shook a letter B to sign blue, and then tapped the air twice with the 5 hand shape. So it would be Blue 55. I struggled a little bit and raised my eyebrows with a question. It should have been perfectly clear I was asking, "So what did you think of that whale?" Somehow, she still didn't seem to get it, and I didn't understand whatever she was trying to say. Nothing that looked like whale or ocean or song. I gave up and turned to Sanjay, who was sitting across from me talking about a new level he had unlocked in a video game or something like that. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nina signing even more furiously. Her friends backed away to avoid getting smacked in the face by her flailing arms. Even though she was the one making the scene, I was getting the attention. Sanjay pointed to tell me I should be looking at Nina, but I waved him off, as if I were dying to know the rest of his video game story. I took a quick glance to see if Nina had given up yet. My face burned as she moved in closer. Great. This girl couldn't recognize a hint if it ran up and set her hands on fire. I reached into my backpack and ripped a piece of paper from the notebook. "What's everyone doing this weekend?" was the first thing I thought of to start a new conversation. Nina was right next to me. I knew this not from looking at her, but from the breeze created by her hands waving at the side of my head. Finally, I turned to look because everyone was pointing by then. What I witnessed was amazing. Not even one sign made sense. I signed to Nina, "I don't understand you," and then turned back to the group. Still, she didn't give up. She leaned over, forcing me to see her, signing with her hands right in my face. I couldn't take it anymore. My face burned hotter. Everyone looked at me like I was the dumb one for not understanding. I pushed her away and signed, "Leave me alone." I didn't mean to push her so hard, but she ended up crashing into the people at the next table and landing on the floor. Nina's mouth was wide open, as if she were yelling. She must have been making a lot of noise since people from all the way across the cafeteria stood up for a better view. The lunch duty teachers made their way to our table then, their faces full of concern. One of their mouths formed the words, "What happened?" A teacher helped Nina up. She rubbed her elbow where she had landed, but seemed fine otherwise. I stood up, swung my backpack over my shoulder. Even though the bell hadn't rung, I headed to the principal's office. That was where they were going to send me anyway. All right, and that was the end of chapter 5, and we will continue on next time. All right, guys. Bye.